Okay, the second part of today is all about a protocol we use to talk over the web called HTTP. So we finished talking about URLs. Now we'll talk about how web servers talk with each other. So HTTP stands for those words. I never remember what they are. You don't have to either. But basically, this is a set of rules we use to describe how browsers and servers talk to each other. So for example, if you and I are talking to each other, we can use English. And I can say something like, hey, can you pass me that piece of paper? And then you would pass me a piece of paper. But computers can't talk in English. They have to have some protocol, some set of rules that specify how the browser and the server talk to each other. The browser can't just write a message in English, hey, give me this file. The server is not going to speak English like that. So we have to specify some set of rules, like a series of zeros and ones, and say, well, this represents requesting a file, and this represents something else. So that's what we're going to talk about, and it's called HTTP. Now later, something called HTTPS was invented, and that's a secure version of HTTP that uses extra cryptography to secure the data as it's being sent. How it does that will come later, but for now, just assume that HTTP is the older, insecure version. HTTPS is the more recent, secure version. And by secure, we mean that attackers on the network, as the data is being sent, cannot see what is being sent. That's the only thing you have to know for now. Now, one important fact about the HTTP protocol is that it's specified as a request-response protocol. So it means, as a browser, you send one and only one request to the web server, and in response, the web server sends you back one and only one response. It's a one-to-one protocol. You can't send one request and get two responses. That doesn't work. You can't send two requests and get one response. That doesn't work either. For every request you send, you get exactly one response. Now, technically, newer versions of HTTP break this rule, but for now, this is the rule that almost all requests and responses use. You send one, you get one back. That's it for this class. So how do you send an HTTP request when your browser requests some data? What does it have to include? Well, one thing it has to include is the URL itself. It has to say, this is what I want. I don't want anything else. I want this particular file or this particular function. And something else we need to specify is a method. So what is a method? It says, what do I want to do with this resource that I'm trying to access? So one thing you can say is you can say, I want to get that resource. In other words, that file, please give it to me. I want that file. So that's what get means. It means, please give me the file that I've specified. And usually, get is used for requests that don't change the server. So for example, if you're downloading a file, that doesn't cause the file to change. So get is a useful method to use in that case. Another common method you'll see is something called post. And this is a case where you actually want to change something on the server. So for example, maybe you want to upload a file and say, actually, I want the server to store this file for me. Well, in that case, you would use a post request to tell the server, here's a file, and I actually want you to store this file. I don't just want to download the file. So whether you want to use get or post or any of the more exotic methods, it depends on the server and the browser. They have to agree on what these methods mean. But when you send a request, you say get or you say post, and the server does something depending on what the server has specified. So the server does have to tell everyone, hey, if you ever want to download a file, use get. And if you ever want to change a file, use post. And servers can technically define weird things, like they can say, oh, I'll let you change a file by using get, but that would be kind of weird. And in general, most people use get for requests that keep the server the same, and they use post for requests that change the server. Technically, you can get weird and do other things, but most people do not do that. And finally, the HTTP request can also contain data. This is separate from everything else we've talked about so far. And whether you want to include data or not depends on what type of request you're making. So if you send a GET request, you're saying, I want to download a file. You don't really have to send any data to the server. The URL is enough to say you want to download a file. But if you're doing a POST request, maybe you do want to send something to the server. You want to send a file and tell the server, you should store this file for me. Or maybe you send a username and a password and you say, I want to log in. You could send a post request and say, here's my username, here's my password, can you log me in? That's an example of a post request that someone could make. So these are the parts of an HTTP request. Anytime your browser wants something, it first specifies what it wants using the URL. It specifies what to do with that thing. Do you want to get it? Do you want to change it by using a post request? And if you are changing it, maybe attach some data to indicate how you want to change it. So that's the request. Anytime you want something, you send a request. Now we move on to the response. So again, in the response, there's a very structured way that servers have to send responses back. And these are the rules for what they have to send. One thing they have to send is a status code that says, what happened to this request? Did it succeed? Did it fail? If it failed, what went wrong with it? So the status code tells us what happened with the request. For example, one status code is 200, which means everything worked out well. Another status code might be 403, which says you are not allowed to access this thing you're trying to access. So if I make a request and say, I want to see your passwords file, the response might be 403. You are not allowed to view this file. There could be 404. We all know this one. It means page not found. It means you're trying to access a file that doesn't exist. So now you know where 404 comes from. It's one of the HTTP status codes, but more exotic ones exist as well. Then the HTTP response can also contain data. So for example, if you asked for a web page or an image or a PDF, then the web server can send you that data back. So anytime there's an HTTP response, it starts with a status code, and then it's followed by the actual data that comes back in the response. Everyone sends one request in the format we talked about, and each request has one corresponding response in this exact format. These are the set of rules we use to make sure that everyone speaking HTTP on the web knows how to exchange data in a meaningful way.